Oh, snap. I just had 2 millimeters to my forehead. I just got robbed by two cats that could have kidnapped me, could have done anything.
Mm-hmm.
I got out of that unscathed, right? That was the motto.
Mm-hmm.
Be grateful. You got out of that one. Learn the lesson of how not to get into a position like that again and keep it moving.
Oh, wow. Somebody going to cue me or do I cue myself?
Cue yourself.
Okay. Everyone, we are back with another episode of Let's Talk Off Camera, so let's get talking. Today is going to be, I think, like the most revealing podcast we've had.
It's a big one.
It's a big one. It's a huge one. She's an actress. She's a musician in her own right. She's a dancer. She's a talk show host. She's Jada Pinkett Smith. She's written a fascinating book that I read in 12 hours. I think I set a personal record reading this book. And she's, this is very funny. I just noticed that we actually covered our Amazon coffee table with a red tablecloth.
With a Target tablecloth.
So we have with a Target. Did you get this at Target?
I don't know where did it come from.
It's a half
Amazon.
So while we wait for Jada to join.
Oh, wait, Kelly, she's actually ready. Our guest is actually ready.
Amazing.
Well, Jada.
Oh, your headphones are going to do.
Oh, yeah, I have to put my headphones on. I got so excited because you look so gorgeous.
So do you. How are you?
I'm so happy to see you and talk to you. Congratulations. The book is phenomenal.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I read it in 12 hours. I could not put it down.
Oh, snap.
The name of the book is Worthy, by the way. It's available everywhere books are sold. The cover is phenomenal, and it is a page turner. So I'm going to bounce around a little bit, but I'm going to start at the beginning. What inspired you to write the book?
I'd have to be honest. I'm very good friends with Jay Shetty, and seeing him like twice a week and just kind of sitting down and, I was visiting him one day, and Radhanath Swami was there, who happens to be his spiritual teacher, that he's now my spiritual teacher. And Jay had just been nudging me like, you got to write a book. And I was like, I don't want to write a book. He'd been nudging me just off and on for a while. And this particular day, he really was on me. And I was like, we kind of got into this sibling, little sister, big brother. He's my little big brother, kind of like banter. And I was like, Jay, stop with that. I'm not writing a book. And Radhanath came in and he was like, Jay, if she doesn't want to write a book, it's okay. And Jay was like, I think she should write a book. And for him to say something to Radhanath, it's just like, whoa. And I went home and I really thought about it. I was like, Jay's your brother. Like, really look into this. Like, what's going on here? Like, why don't you want to write a book? And to be honest with you, I didn't think my story was worthy enough to write a book.
That's shocking, because if your story isn't worthy enough for a book, then if you're an author writing a book right now, you should just stop. If this book is not the most worthy piece of literature, I don't know what is. I was spellbound. It starts out spellbinding and it progresses from there.
Yeah, I just came with the line, I just thought of the line. I was in meditation. I was like, oh, my journey from feeling unlovable to lovable, from feeling unworthy to worthy. I was like, there it is. I get it.
When I look at you, because Mark and I and you and Will have been sort of together separately for a long time.
Right.
Intertwined, interconnected, long-term partnerships for a really, really long time.
Yes.
We go back to the early 90s. I believe you are the same. And, it went from there. And so we always looked at you two like sort of the benchmark.
Right.
Like you're the benchmark. And I don't want to give away the entire book, but this book opens with something that like took my breath away, sucked my breath away, because here you are, Jada Pinkett Smith, critically acclaimed actress, musician, dancer. You have these 3 beautiful children. You are, you, from my outside perspective, have it all. And it's on the eve of your 40th birthday. And you are contemplating suicide.
Yeah.
You are thinking of a way to drive your car off of Mulholland Drive.
Yes. I start off, in one of those darkest moments of my life of trying to think of a way that I could kill myself, but make it seem like it's an accident so that my kids don't think that I actually committed suicide. And, on my way, just looking, and just, and I eventually in that section talk about the help that I'm also going to get so that I don't do that. So, but yeah, that was a very, very dark time in my life. And I think that, one of the most interesting things about living a life in the spotlight is that everybody thinks that everything that's, kind of in front of the cameras is all that's happening. And there's so much going on behind the camera, off camera.
I mean, I think the most shocking thing to me in this book is that you and Will you've not been living as a married couple since 2016. So explain it to our listeners. It's not really an open marriage. What is it?
Well, now what was going on in 2016 versus what's happening now are two very different things, right?
Okay.
And so in 2016, we decided to go our separate ways. We had tried. And we just felt like we were both tired, and we were trying to figure out, okay, do we start with a legal separation? Do we actually get a divorce, right? And as we are going through these different machinations of trying to figure out how to be uncoupled, but yet we love our family, right? We really love our family and love us together as a family, right? The marriage wasn't working in the way that we felt like it needed to, but how do we keep our family together and how do we remain family? And so we went through many different trials and errors of just trying to figure that piece out. And we didn't want to say anything to the public until we figured it out, And over the years, it just kept changing, right? And so now what are we in, 2023?
Yeah, I know. By the way, exactly. I was just like, wait, what year is it right now?
We're in 2023.
2023, right.
Everything that we've been through together and realizing that how much we value each other, and how much we are a mirror to one another and how we're what we have, and how much we actually really love each other. And so marriage to us, it's more like a life partnership, And so that's why I very rarely refer to it as a marriage, because how people refer to marriage, right? I'm not trying to redefine the word marriage, because that's like messing with religion, And so for me, it's more, we want to share life together, and we look at our partnership as the cornerstone of our family and our lives, and even to this day, we're still trying to figure out exactly what it means, because it's constantly changing.
Marriage is so complicated under the most uncomplicated circumstances, right?
Right.
And what I think you make so, you draw a line that is so clear. Whatever happened in the childhoods and the childhoods of the people raising the children and them before them is played out in real time in your existence.
Yeah.
So it's like what happened to your mother and what happened to her mother played into what happened to you, and this sudden urgency to get married and you can't be an unwed mother, and all of those hangups they're so generational.
Well, yeah, I think that those childhood traumas do play out. Those familial dynamics play out in our adult relationships and mostly in our intimate relationships, and I think in marriages, that's part of the, or intimate partnerships, that is part of what comes into play of needing healing, because our intimate partners become our mirrors in a way of reflecting back to us, whatever those voids were, whatever those unhealed wounds may be. And then really having to figure out each person, we're all such unique individuals. So once we come together in a partnership, it creates a unique dynamic that is very specific to those two people. So you can't really depend on a cookie cut out kind of path for everyone in order to figure out their partnership. And I think marriage is really, and life partnerships and whatever people want to call it, is really, how do you create a haven of healing that gets you to the highest point of love in whatever form that might be?
And when you were going through and writing this book, did you run everything by your mother, by Will? Did they have editorial approval? Or
no editorial approval.
Okay.
But I mean, I did, my mother, I definitely ran a lot by her and talked to Will extensively, One of the reasons why I couldn't do, let's say, editorial approval is because I'd been living my life on editorial approval. Right?
Yep.
And this was, I needed to create I needed to have this freedom space. This is a gateway for myself. I mean, listen, I created the Red Table for, to create this space of transparency. And there was a lot that was transparent, but there were times where, I had to forsake my truth in order to protect, or, in order to keep a kind of insular, what do you call it? Just kind of keeping very private what might be happening between Will and I in a very intimate space, because we didn't have the stability in order to share certain things at that particular point of time, right? Now we do, we have that stability. And so I needed to have this platform, my book, in order to really tell my story the way that I saw best. And that was really a healing necessity for me. It's like a gate into a new realm of myself, because my codependency has always kept me from that one extra step, to really take care of myself and my story in a certain manner. And I wasn't going to do that with this book.
Well, there's so much, there was a lot of chaos in your childhood, a lot of, I think there was so much love, first of all. That's the one thing I really took away, is that there was so much love. But I feel that sometimes if you come from chaos or you live in chaos, when you're not in chaos, that can feel very destabilizing. Did you have that experience? Did not being in chaos feel bad for you?
Yeah, not being in chaos felt like something was wrong, And so, yeah, I had to unlearn I had to unlearn the idea, or like those kind of messaging in the body and the mind, that those familiar ties to chaos that make chaos feel right.
Mm-hmm.
And like chaos is where I am supposed to exist. And that, I mean, and that took a very long time to figure that out and to recognize red flags and to recognize when I'm in the midst of unmanageability within myself and in my environment.
What was so interesting to me was somebody said to you, you have more talent in your little finger when you were
Donald Hicken.
Donald, yes.
He's the head of the theater department at Baltimore School for the Arts. Yeah.
Right. And when he said that, I was it's like, and here you are on the side, right? Trying to, and really having moments of great success selling drugs.
Yeah.
You were really, I mean, it's so funny because when I look at you, the last thing I think of, right, is and I guess that's probably why
That's
you were
what worked.
Right. That's what worked. The last person you would think of to buy drugs from would be you. And there's one moment in particular, it all sounds scary to me, but this one moment in particular where you're basically set up.
Yeah.
In real time, were you aware that there were clearly angels surrounding you?
Not really. You know, it was more like, oh man, okay. I literally dodged that bullet. You know what I mean? Right. And how lucky.
Well, they had a gun to your head.
Exactly. You know, I think I was trying to explain this the other day. It's like when we grew up in a war zone. It's not, I know that in the book, when you think about the Jada I am today, it's like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe that happened, right?
Right.
Where I grew up, how I grew up, and, you know, amongst what I was growing up with, right? It wasn't unusual. It was just life. So
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't like, oh my goodness, I can't believe, you know, this is happening to me. It's like I was very clear about you know, the pitfalls of what I was getting into. There had been people who had suffered far worse. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was more like, okay, this is what it is. Keep it moving. That was the motto. Keep
Mm-hmm.
it moving. Be grateful. Keep it moving. You got out of that one. Learn the lesson of how not to get into a position like that again and keep it moving. I didn't stop and think about, oh snap, I just had 2 millimeters, you know, to my forehead. I just got robbed by 2 cats that could have kidnapped me, raped me, could have done anything.
Mm-hmm.
I got out of that unscathed, right? And no, it was like, all right, now I need to get my shit back.
It was, it's like shocking that
Yeah,
you were like, you focused on that.
Yeah, I was like, I got to get my shit back. Like,
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't know who I am. He doesn't know who I'm affiliated with, and I need my shit back.
Yeah.
Right. So this is the mentality of the place
Right.
I come from, you know.
But
and
you were living such a bifurcated life because you also like had a job at merry-go-round.
Right.
Like,
yeah,
who didn't go to merry-go-round?
No, that was the rule. You know, my mentor
Right.
told me always have a legit job.
But you were also modeling on the side and getting acting gigs on the side. So you were truly living like a bifurcated life. Like
I'd done that from childhood, though. It's like I lived in the house with my grandmother, who was, you know, middle class Black bourgeoisie, and then I'd go, you know, with my grandparents, you know, Shirley and Grant, who were more middle class, you know, working class Black, and then I was in the hood with my mother, who was an addict, and then I was with my father, who was an addict. Like I was always in these different worlds that I had to learn how to navigate. So being in different worlds all at once was kind of, I thought everybody
right.
like that.
But that was your foray into acting
Yeah.
as if everything is normal.
Exactly.
Yeah. So take me into, because you really set the scene of the moment you met Tupac, and then you really set the scene um, because, honestly, I only know Tupac from his music. And
Right.
then I knew he was taken way too soon.
Yeah.
But you had this epic friendship with him. It's so funny. Like when I read it, I was like, oh, they definitely were in love with each other, but not in the way that my mind was thinking.
Right.
But you also take us inside the unbearable poverty that he lived in.
We had a lot of love for each other, in a, I mean, Pac played so many different roles in my life, from big brother to sometimes father to sometimes a platonic boyfriend. Like, nah, I'm going with you to that premiere, like, I'm gonna be on your arm, and when we first met, he owned 2 pairs of pants and a sweater. When I went to Pac's home for the first time, I mean, I was always in the projects, and his home made the projects look like the Four Seasons, and so we really got close because we both helped each other survive in different ways. He was the guy who, I didn't have a father, so he was always had a very protective energy. Like, I'm here for you. I'm gonna make sure you're good. And I'm like, I'm gonna make sure you eat. I'm gonna make sure you got clothes on your back. You know what I
You
mean?
did it very covertly because you did not want him to feel emasculated in any way.
Yeah, he was very prideful. It's like, so I had to, I would do it in ways of like, I was just thinking about you, I was down at the Gap, when I had my job at the Gap, and I would get discounts, you know what I'm saying? I was like, yo, I saw this khaki jacket. I thought it'd be dope on you. He would respond to that, but it could never be charity. That was not, and so, and we became very close, very quickly, because we both had 2 mothers who suffered from addiction. And like I talk about in the book, we were orphans in a certain manner, and we just took care of each other. And I think that the thing about Pac, he was very much about loyalty. And I think for him, because I was down for him when he wasn't known as Tupac Shakur, and, he was broke and had nothing, in his mind, but he had he had his intelligence, and he had his friendship to offer me, and his care and his consideration. But once we got out to Hollywood, when we got out here, because we knew each other, when we could pull each other's coattails in a way that others couldn't, It was just like, hey, you can take that Tupac Shakur, get down, you can leave that at the door, because and he would do the same with me. He's like, hey, with all that Jada Pinkett on Different World, yeah.
I like that he called you back in high school. You were square. He called you the square.
He called me square. Yeah, he called me square.
It's so funny because you were not a square, like the coolest girl ever, and I was like, oh my god.
It's like just a big brother dig. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, I'm gonna make sure that head of yours doesn't get big. I'm just gonna call you a square.
So you get out to Hollywood. Who were the people that you would say really like got you, saw you, like got it right away? So you get out to Hollywood. Who were the people that you would say really like got you right away?
Well, Debbie Allen, number one. The moment that I came in to audition for A Different World, she saw me, and I came in for a guest role, and she decided to bring me on as a series regular. And then I would say Keenan Ivory Wayans, who allowed me to use his name so that I could get my first agent, you know, and then, a couple of years later, put me in, I started a movie with him, which, played Peaches and Low Down Dirty Shame, but he kept me out of trouble at a
You
time.
wanted to be a fly girl, right?
I wanted to be a fly girl. Yeah. For sure. I kept begging him, like, come on, put me I want to be a fly girl on A Living Color. And he was like, no way. That is not what you came out here to do. But eventually he put me in and I mean, one of the to this day, it's a classic comedy, that I was in. But I'm forever grateful to Keenan, forever grateful.
So when you met Will, you were both big stars, but I feel like you had gone into the film world. Like you were making movies.
Right.
And did you have interest in Will? I feel like he really pursued you.
Yeah, he did. He did for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what finally broke you down? Because I remember, I don't know if I read an interview that you had given, or maybe if I had interviewed you on the talk show, and you had said something about you thought his music was so corny.
Yeah. Yeah, but except for Brand New Funk, which
right.
to this day. But yeah, he wasn't in my, he kind of wasn't the guy that I would imagine myself to be with, I liked street dudes. And in my mind, that was like, I was like, Fresh Prince. I mean, he's cool, but that's not really my thing,
Right.
But then I got to know him, and of course I started to mature a bit as well.
Right.
And, Will is made of so many things, quite like myself. Once I started to learn about his history, and he's so well read. He's super intelligent and super funny and really talented, really driven. Like he was checking all these boxes, and I was like, wow, I really, he taught me not to judge a book by its cover.
Right.
A lot more there than what meets the eye. And so when we had a friend of ours, Dwayne Martin, invited us both to dinner, and I really got to know him. And I was like, wow, all right, Will. You know what I mean? But after that, I didn't talk to him for a whole year after that.
Oh, wow. So I'm going to jump ahead.
Yeah.
The second you get pregnant, somehow, it's like fascinating to me that you knew the second you got pregnant, and you said to him, I'm pregnant.
I'm pregnant.
And he was like hysterically laughing. He was making fun of you.
Yeah, he made fun of me. And I remember crying that whole night. Oh, what have I done? Like, because I just knew for a fact, right? I explain it as like, those big bank locks that have like the steering wheel on them.
Yep. Uh-huh.
Almost like it was like, it's just like something clicked in my womb, just like lockdown.
Uh-oh.
It's like, what? And I looked to Will and I was like, I'm pregnant. And he was like, jump up and down, stand on your head. You know what I mean? Like, and he just thought it was the funniest thing.
Because you're so young, you're 25 years old, right? You're not married.
No.
You're just like dating. You're having fun. You're having the time of your life.
We're having a good time. I was not expecting to like have a child at 25, 26 years old. So
you tell your mom.
I tell my mother.
I was expecting her to say, you don't have to. Right? Yeah. I thought for sure this was going to be the full circle moment where look at how far we've come. But she says, well, you have to get married.
Yeah. She gave me what, happened to her when she got pregnant. My grandmother said, you got to get married.
Right.
And I really, I struggled with that because I wasn't one of those, me not wanting to get married had nothing to do with Will. Absolutely nothing. It didn't have to do like, I didn't want to marry Will. I didn't want to marry anybody. Like that wasn't, I wasn't that girl who, dreamed of having the dream wedding and getting married to somebody.
Same.
That was never the plan.
Mm-hmm.
But, that changed between Will and my mom. And but at first it was a very difficult thing for me to get my head around.
You really just, I'm literally in the book. I'm so riveted because, Albert, Jada describes like she's walking down the aisle with Will. They're both wearing, who's the amazing Badgley Mishka, like cream velvet, right?
Yeah.
Right. They're walking down the aisle together and you're like, you start out smiling and then halfway down the aisle, you are sobbing.
Oh no.
And Mark and I eloped because that's how much not a bride I am.
That's what I wanted to do.
Listen, I am with you, but even in the moment of eloping, just the two of us, I was terrified. I was shaking. I was scared to death. There's so much your brain is, I don't know how people get married in front of other people. I actually don't know how it's possible.
Yeah, it's a hard one. A lot of stuff came up for me, and you're right. It was just pure terror. I was just like, I'm not built for what I knew the journey was going to be. And it was really me, now looking back, me being afraid of, all of the process of coming into knowing myself through him being my mirror in this relationship. All of the deep healing I was going to have to do, everything I was going to be confronted with. And I just wasn't up for that journey. But I'm glad I took it.
The two of you have very different love languages.
Yes.
Can you explain it to me? Because you made an agreement in your marriage that I don't know that I would be able to honor.
Oh, you mean as far as not
using profanity?
Using profanity. Yeah.
I would not be able to speak. I would have no words.
That was a really interesting moment when that was really a boundary as far as Will was concerned. And Will, having grown up with so much violence, domestic violence in his house, and him recognizing where words could take an argument. It was a boundary that he put up early because, I was a really hard talker and cursing. I'm with you. I'm like, I can't cuss. Then how am I supposed to express myself?
I understand that world.
Yeah, I had to learn, and over the years, we went too extreme into being too careful, and it wasn't quite honest, into figuring out how to communicate honestly with words that weren't in his mind violent, right? And it's been a practice. It's taken a while. And we definitely have two different love languages. I mean, Will likes to eventize everything, everything is very, he loves to, it's about memories, and it's about, all of the external kind of expressions, like, oh, it's, we're going to go to the safari for, to celebrate the fact that you graduated high school, versus I'm more like, oh, I'm going to write you this poem and I want to look at, I want us to do a little picnic and at candlelight. And I just want to look in your eyes and just tell you how much I love you.
It's a huge difference. And it's like sometimes in my mind, when there's like this big, public, giant, fancy thing, it's more about the giver than the receiver.
Yeah. Yeah. That's how I used to feel at times, and I really had to come to the fact that that really is how he likes to express himself. You know what I mean? And he's learning how to meet me. Here's the funny thing, over the years, recently, like the last 2 years, learning how to meet each other more, me inching more towards, okay, the more ventized memory, and him being more willing to meet
Quiet
me.
it down.
Quiet it down. Yeah.
And did you, because I feel like when you're traveling and when you're with your families, there's always like large groups of people.
Yeah.
And Mark and I do this a lot too. Like we'll travel with our family and our friends, and it's like a large group. And then we'll realize it's been a really long time since the two of us sat down and had dinner together, just the two of us.
Yeah.
And, and what will irritate me is I will be eating and he'll be like texting on the phone or taking a phone call in the middle of dinner or, and that is like, this is our first meal in a year together. What are you doing? Do you have that going on as well?
It's so funny. I feel like through everything that we've been through in the last couple of years, we have been really attentive. When we're in each other's presence, we actually make it a point. It just comes naturally. No phones, and we are really diving in and being very attentive to one another and to what the other person is saying, tuning into what that person might need. But, we've had some really extreme circumstances that have had to bring us to a different level of how we share time together. And it's nice. It's actually nice.
So let's get into, we'll call it out as it's referred to as the entanglement. Can you explain, because I think there's so many misconceptions that you set straight in the book about your relationship with this guy, August Alsina. You really took a beating when you decided to talk about it on Red Table Talk.
Right.
Can you just set the scene for our listeners, and can you explain to me why you didn't call Will out in real time?
So like you brought up earlier, we hadn't been together since 2016. So that entanglement happened after we had gone our separate ways. And when that person decided to come out and speak on it, I had that relationship had been over for 2 years, and I was in a place where I really didn't want to be emotionally blackmailed in that way, if that makes any sense. And I was like, hey, I'm going to own this. I have no shame around it. So I was going to go to the table by myself. But then Will decided that he wanted to come to the table with me. And he was like, I really want you to do this alone. And I think the misconception was that I asked Will to come to the table.
You somehow forced him.
I forced him to come to the table, and that just wasn't the case. You can't force Will to do anything, okay?
Right.
But he wanted to come to the table. And I think that once he got to the table, and I was actually, to be honest with you, I was a bit surprised, considering where we were sitting in regards to our relationship at that time. And I actually was like, wow, that's a beautiful offering, And I think that once he came to the table, what everyone got to see, which was really interesting, and I didn't even know it in present time of how deeply I recognize it now, but the dynamic between us, I started to see him get uncomfortable. I started to see that he was not ready. And my codependency kicked right in. And I was like, I am going to make sure you are good by any means necessary. And even if that means taking on the false narrative that I've been the adulterous wife.
Wow.
And
wow.
Because two things needed to happen. I came to that table prepared to let go of a certain persona of myself and a persona of my relationship, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And I came prepared. I did not want to backpedal on that. I was like, I'm not gonna backstep on me needing this for myself. I want out of this handmade golden cage that I created for myself. And at the same time, how do I help take care of someone who's actually not ready for that part of the journey? Right?
Yep.
And my codependency was like, well, do what you usually do and just take it all on.
Take it on the chin.
Just take it on the chin. You do it well. That's what you do. So that's what I did, and I have to be honest with you. I mean, as you read in the book, so many people were like, please, Jada, do not, specifically my executive producer, Ellen Rakuten, Miguel Melendez, it was so many people, my mother, I mean, everybody. And they were like, this is not fair, and I was thinking to myself, this is what it needs to be now. And I also thought, look, this is your mess, Jada. That was another thing, that kind of code that I grew up with. It's like, yo, this is your mess. So this is your brunt to bear. You got to take this on the chin. This is your shit,
Wow.
But it's a level of accountability that very few people have in life, which is going to bring me to the Oscars. Before we talk about what happens within the chapter, you said something that resonated with me so much because I have been on the receiving end of being made accountable for decisions men have made in my life, where I am somehow held accountable for something that had nothing to do with me. And it's women that are the most vocal in holding me accountable. Which
I know all about that.
I know. So take us to the Oscars, take everybody there. You portray it in a way that makes a lot of sense to me.
So which part do you want me to take you back to?
The whole thing.
The whole thing.
The whole thing.
Take us to the Oscars.
Well, let me just say, when I saw Chris's name come up as a presenter, I felt in my gut. I said, oh, wow. Okay.
Uh-oh. Yes.
And I was like, well, we made our amends. Chris apologized to me for 2016, that whole Oscar situation, and we made our amends. I apologized to him and what have you, just in regards to.
He felt like when you were boycotting the Oscars, that maybe you were boycotting him.
Yeah, and that wasn't the case at all. And I never called him. I know he said this in his special, but I never called Chris to tell him not to host the Oscars. That never occurred, right? And I remember when I made the video and I said, hey, I actually think I think you're the best for the job and I'm wishing you luck. Now, I should have, instead of just saying that on a video, I should have just called him and said, man, I know this is a really tough position for you to be in, and I'm just calling you to see how you're doing. And I think because we knew each other, I think his feelings were hurt. I'm just gonna, I can't speak for him, but I'd have to say, I think his feelings were hurt because I wasn't the only one that was speaking out about the Oscars.
Right.
But, he kind of struck out in that way. So.
Because you knew each other, you had worked together and you had a good relationship.
We had a really cool relationship, you know. He wasn't somebody that I talked to every day, but
He's
he's somebody,
a lovely guy.
he's
Like,
a lovely
yeah,
guy, you
yes,
know,
right.
and, you know, I got to see that side of Chris, you know, and I talk about that in the book, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But when I did see his name come up, I was like, oh, wow, I hope he plays nice.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I left it at that. And Will had been getting up, you know, going back and forth. And so when the incident happened, because when I first saw Will get up and walk on stage, I was like, oh, wow, is this a skit? Did he not tell me that he met up with Chris backstage? And it also how Chris was reacting, because Chris was like, oh, here comes Mr. Smith. Like he was, you know what I mean? And so I was like, oh, maybe this is a skit, because there have been skits all night, you know, people getting up and interacting with the host and, you know, and so,
I think the audience should know that you and Will were not really like,
right.
He invited you to the Oscars and you were kind of surprised that he asked you to come.
Yes. Now, let me take a minute there, because once Will finished filming Emancipation, a lot of stuff was coming up for him, rightfully so. It's a very difficult movie to shoot. It really was, right? And after he shot that movie where he played a slave, he called me and was like, will you go into therapy with me?
Wow.
And at first I was really reluctant. I really had to reach for my willingness. And we started going into therapeutic settings together. And it was really deep, you know, all the stuff that was coming up for him and stuff he wanted to really look at with me. And so there was this new blossoming of like, I don't know, just kind of like this partnership in healing. And so when he got nominated, he said, you know, I know we're not together, but you're the only person that I want by my side during this time of my life. You know, he's like, we've been through so much together, and I want you by my side for this memory. You know, and I was
because everybody was saying he was going to win. It felt like a foregone conclusion. It was happening.
Exactly. It was happening. And, you know, I really had to think about that. You know, I was like, you know, and I wanted to be there as well, you know, but it was just a lot happening in the background. Right. And so finally I was like, you know, I'll be by your side to support you. So I was there as family.
Right.
We hadn't been calling ourselves husband and wife since 2016.
Got it.
But we've been going on red carpets and what have you as family, because that's what we do. So at the Oscars, he walks up on stage and this whole thing happens with he and Chris. And I'm like, I'm thinking at first that it's a skit, and it looks like Chris slipped the shot from where I'm sitting. It looks like Chris slipped the shot, and I'm like, oh, this is a skit. And then
that's what we all thought, for the record. We all thought.
Everybody in the, you know, there at the ceremony thought the same thing, until Will turned around and was coming back, and I said, what's going on here? You know what I mean?
He had a different look in his eye.
He had I was like, this isn't, he's not here.
Right.
He comes to the seat, I grab his hand, I said, are you okay? And then he's saying, oh, you know,
he's talking. Yeah, he's yelling at Chris.
You know, keep my wife's name out of your mouth. And I was like, wife, whoa, where are we? Ah, yes. Wow, yes, I am his wife.
Right.
You know, I was like, wife? I was like, what's happening right now? You know?
Right.
And I was really at a loss. I was very, very worried about Will, because I didn't know what happened. I just didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what was going on.
Right.
And so, all of it kept going back and forth. Chris came down.
Yes, I did not realize this, that he actually came down to talk to you.
Yeah, he came down to talk to me, which Will kept getting upset about. And he was like, he looked at me and he said, look, Jada, I meant no harm.
Right.
And at that time, I was so disrupted because I was
you're in shock.
Out of sorts of what is happening right now. And I just said to Chris, this is about some old shit, and I just can't right now. Because
right.
Will is still doing his thing. Denzel comes over, to just be by Will, to just make sure he's calm and good and what have you. Questlove goes up, gets his award, and then we go to commercial break. And I'm just grateful for the men at that time, right? Because Denzel and Bradley Cooper, all the men that gathered around Will, because I have to be honest, I didn't know what was going on.
Like, were you in your body? Did you float away at a certain point?
I was very still. I didn't want to trigger anything. I knew that something was going on with Will.
Right.
He wasn't, something was going on. And so his publicist, my publicist, come to the seats. His publicist, Meredith, says, Chris is, he's left the building and he's not going to press charges. And I said, press charges for what? Because Will hit Chris. And I was like,
That made contact?
Yeah. I was like, well, you actually hit Chris. He said yes. And I knew from there. I was like, okay, this is going to be something for us to contend with when we leave these doors, So.
But did you know that you would take the brunt of the blame and all of it?
Absolutely.
You did. You already knew.
Absolutely. I already knew. I know. I'm not, listen, this is age old.
It's just like so, to me, it's the fact that women get blamed all the time for what happens when things are out of their control. But a lot of people felt like you should have somehow physically restrained him.
Right.
And I just want to point out like the size differential between the two of you. Will is arguably a very large man. For God's sakes, he plays prize fighters. He knows how to fight.
Right. And I'm going to take it back one step further. The last thing I'm thinking is that Will is getting on stage to do anything to Chris.
Right.
Like, I'm not thinking, like, that's not what I'm thinking. I'm not thinking, he's going to go up there and do something to Chris. No, I was like, oh, this must be a skit. I'm shocked. I'm like, oh. So
we thought the entire thing was a skit, like from the joke to the camera view to the eye roll. Like it was timed kind of beautifully that your expression got a big laugh. Like it was like all very, and I was like, oh, this is such a funny bit.
Right. And even with the joke, I wasn't pissed about me. That's the other thing. It's like with the journey I had been on with other people in regards to alopecia, and just even to this day, how people just take it so lightly and just don't understand, what people who suffer from alopecia go through, and to make a joke about a condition that someone can't, there's actually no cure for alopecia,
Did he know, like, was it well known?
I don't know. I don't know.
Right.
No, I have no idea.
So it was just one of those things where you're like, oh God.
Well, just like here we go again on the Oscar stage with this whole circumstance. It's like, I'm not even, why are you bringing me into this?
So, do you think that incident brought you closer together. You became like a united front.
You know what's so interesting about these kinds of circumstances? It can either go two ways. It's going to amplify love or deteriorate it.
Mm-hmm.
And this brought our entire family closer together in regards to healing, right? In regards to really having to look at some things.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, who are you when somebody's in a time of need, you know? And I knew in that moment that I needed to be by his side and we needed to be by each other's side and really look at whatever was coming up for us individually, for us in our dynamic, you know what I mean?
Sure.
And really really heal.
When you're driving home that night, was there a conversation? Was there silence?
Well, you know, that's for the second book because let me tell you the journey. I'm hoping that we'll be able to write something together, actually, you know, because the journey that takes place after that evening is quite a journey, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot happens. A lot happens.
Well, I've got to tell you, there's so much I want to say to you. There's so much still to cover. We scratched the surface with this book. But before we sign off, and I really appreciate you doing the podcast, I want to tell you that I was on a flight with your son, Jaden. This is many years ago. And it was JetBlue.
He loves
and he was the best. And I think it's important to tell parents when their kids are incredibly polite and kind when nobody's looking, when it's not like a public event. Yeah. And I remember I was with my son Joaquin at the time, who was like, maybe he was 12 or 13 years old. And he pointed Jaden out to me.
Right.
And I was like, that's Jaden Smith. And I was watching him be polite and conscientious to everyone. And I said to him, see that? I said, that's how you behave when your parents aren't around. You behave like that kid is behaving. That's how you behave. And I was able to hold him up as an example. So I just want to not only congratulate you on your book, but congratulate you on raising your children because they're.
Thank you. That's like the highest.
when your kids are conscientious and kind when you're not around, it's like very important.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much for doing the podcast. The book, Worthy, is out now. It's available everywhere you get your books. Thanks for doing the show, and all my love to you. And you look great, by the way. So
do you. So do you.
Thank you so much. All my love.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Kelly Ripa. I think that's probably one of my favorite interviews you've ever done.
I forgot to show her the red tablecloth. Be sure to tell your friends about us. Bye, everyone. Can't wait to talk off camera next week. Bye-bye. Let's Talk Off Camera with Kelly Ripa is a co-production of Melojo Productions and PRX Productions with help from Goat Rodeo. Our theme song is Follow Me from APM Music. From Melojo, our team is Kelly Ripa, Mark Consuelos, Albert Bianchini, Jan Chalet, Devin Schneider, Michael Halpern, Jacob Small, Roz Therian, Seth Gronquist, and Julia Desch. From PRX Productions, our team is Kara Schillen, Genevieve Sponsler, Megan Nadolski, Isabel Kirby McGowan, Edwin Ochoa. Additional sound design by Terrence Bernardo. The executive producer of PRX Productions is Jocelyn Gonzalez. This show is powered by Stitcher.